I'm talking today to Dominic Harris. He's Managing Director of Carbon Quota. This is a company that in a relatively short time has become kind of synonymous with the printing industry's efforts to be more environmentally sustainable. Could you provide us a bit of an overview of Carbon Quota, how it's developed over the years, how it started, its vision? Bring us up
Yeah, I
to
love
date.
this story. It's always the best way to start a chat, right, Jack? So I think, so a little bit of background. I always start the story on myself, actually, which is slightly self-centered, and I apologise for that. But I come
Go
from
for it.
our sector. I'm a print guy through and through. At 16, I left school in the olden days when I didn't have to go to university, and I entered the print industry. So for a very, very long time, I won't tell you how old I am, for a very long time, I've been in the industry. And then about 5 years ago, myself and my business partner, Nathan, we were actually sat in a pub having a beer, and we were speaking about sustainability in the print packaging display sector, a sector that we are so passionate about, Jack. I mean, I love the sector. But what we said was that the sector is really bad at doing sustainability. There's no science behind it. There's a lot of greenwash that exists in the industry. And I hate saying that because I love the sector. And that was actually the birth of Carbon Quota, was literally, we called it the 2 beer idea 5 years ago. Now, so we set out our stall and we started Carbon Quota, and it was just a couple of us at the time. We're now 25 people. We now have the most incredible customer base that I can dream of. I'm actually very proud of what we've done. And what we do is we apply science to the environmental impact of a printer or the goods that they produce. And the reason we apply science is that's the thing that overrides anything to do with sustainability. So we all hear words around, sustainable is one word. We always hear words like green. We always, hear words, recyclable, it's recycled, it's all of those words. And they're wonderful words because they all have a meaning, but what they don't have is a scientific measure. And that is what carbon footprint is the scientific measure. It is a number that if it's higher, if it's 100 for one thing and 50 for another thing, the 50 is better than the 100, right? So the whole premise of what we've done is created a scientific approach to our industry, works with printers, whether they're a teeny little printer under the arches, whether they're the biggest printer in the world, is completely irrelevant. It is about using science. And today we've got a great, client base, as I say, Jack.
People want to be more sustainable, but don't necessarily have the tools or knowledge or way to do that, which is kind of where you come in. But I think that one of the barriers must have always been, how much time is it going to take to do this? And I think this is one of the strengths of you, I should imagine, is how you make it much more accessible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's time and cost, by the way. So because anybody who wants to measure using a third party, whether it was us or somebody else, it costs money, right? It's just the way it is. Now, we recognise that the sector generally runs on lower margins than other sectors. The sector is, especially through COVID, it's been a difficult time for everybody. Of course, we recognise that. So we've got different solutions depending on what a customer does. It's, we may have gold star solutions that Procter & Gamble pay, but they're Procter & Gamble and they can afford it. But their tiny little packaging supplier that's based out of Essex somewhere can't afford the same budget. So what we've done is created software packages that allow different businesses to do different things at a much lower price point. And in fact, we're at the point we're just launching something at the moment, which is specifically designed for the SME market. So it's online, it's self-serve, and it's the beginning of a carbon journey. So it allows the businesses to say what the carbon footprint of their operation is, okay? And it allows them to repeat that in a year and repeat it a year later, and they're able to see how they're reducing their carbon footprint. But that's designed for an SME. So there are many things that we do, Jack, to make sure that our services are relevant to our industry. Now, what I will say, though, it varies from sector to sector within our industry. So if you look at, for example, the publishing market is in the printing industry, that's a relatively straightforward fibre-based product that's produced, and therefore we have a solution that is perfectly suited for publishing. But then if we look at the display sector, that's very different, because the display sector typically produces a product that is plastic based, usually, sometimes fiber based, I know. It's typically a product that's very big because it's a three-dimensional, product. It's a display product. And because it's big in structure, it has a very high carbon footprint. Therefore, the customers that are buying it want to know what the carbon footprint is. So in the display world, it's very, very, very important for businesses to measure. In the world of I only print business cards or letterheads, it's less important. So, and that's a real sort of oddity within the sector. Depending on what you produce is how much effort you should put in. And then depending on who your customers are is how much effort you should put into it. Now, what I will say though is that if you deal with a big retail brand, if you deal with anything in construction, anything in events, I mean, the list goes on, those people right now are focused heavily on making sure that any product they buy from their supply chain, i.e. all the people that you and I network with all the time, they have to be able to do it now. And that's a real change that we've seen in 2024. In 2023, it was less, but this year, it's a real change. That's only going to get bigger. And that's driven through laws and regulations. I mean, Jack, we're not in the EU. Okay, so therefore we've got our own laws in the UK. That's fine. But in the EU, there are a tidal wave of carbon-related pieces of legislation that will impact our sector. And the UK will be behind that. And, different parts of the world are seeing that tidal wave of legislations coming. And it all comes down to you must measure.
And I guess from your customers, that the easier it is for you to provide that information without sort of, I'll come back to you in a few days. If it's all there and ready to go, you're more chance of winning that work. It's going up for tender, I guess.
Yeah. Well, a great use case is one of our customers is Lush, the high street retailer Lush, who are a beautiful, beautiful business. Despite being a very big retailer, their environmental impact is as low as it can be. They're a great organisation. So we started working with them 2 or 3 years ago now, and we help them with their packaging, we help them with their window display, all of the sort of materials they use to package those bath bombs up that smell so wonderful. And so that started the relationship. But then they said, well, I want you to work with our supply chain. And we do now. So we work with the supply chain that makes all of the stuff for Lush. Now, that connection is critical because there is lots of very beautiful, rich data in the supply chain that Lush want. And the supply chain want to retain the Lush customer because they want to provide them carbon footprint information. So that kind of relationship is a lovely use case to explain it. It's albeit quite a small one, but imagine if you're Unilever. Imagine if you are, I don't know, Bath Heinz. That model happens now in a very large scale where the mega brands are pushing their suppliers and their suppliers are trying to help the mega brands. And we sit in that middle space, right? We deal with both brands and suppliers, and connecting those two things together fixes the problem. It fixes all of the problems that we've got.
So what you do is data-based, isn't it? You're pulling information from various places. So I think we've talked about this in the past, but a lot of what you do now is work or integrate with a company's MIS systems to provide this. Do you want to sort of fill us in a bit how that has developed and where that's going?
Yeah, so it's probably 3 years old now, but it's picked up pace this year, I guess. That the one thing that we recognise is if you're a printing company and you're producing a poster or a vinyl or a product for a brand, to be able to say the carbon footprint of my thing I've just made for you is X is very complex. Yeah, and there's 2 ways of doing it. Probably 3 ways of doing it, to be fair, Jack. You go to university for 7 years and you become a qualified LCA practitioner. Now, your average print business, display business is not going to do that. Yeah, okay. So, because that's the only way you can have a certified carbon footprint is be qualified to provide this information. And we found that a lot. That existed to a degree in some areas. You could do it badly. So the option 2 is you could go onto a website like DEFRA and you could kind of cobble it together if you know how to use an Excel spreadsheet. Okay. Again, not great. Okay. So therefore that this problem existed where they need automation. So what we started with was we integrated our database, our technology platform into Farston, okay, which is a very well used application in the UK and European print market. It's one of the MIS systems that's used. So we integrated into Farston. That was the first one we did a couple of years ago. And what happens is the operations director or the account manager within the printing company builds the estimate for the customer, and then in the background, all the intelligent scientific stuff just happens, and the carbon footprint gets printed on the estimate. So when they say to their customer, here's the price for the job, I want to win the job for you, it says the price and it says the carbon footprint. So we've automated the entire process. The printer actually doesn't know it's happening, by the way. It happens so cleverly in the background with databases and API connections and all these words I don't necessarily understand. That's why I employ developers. And that was the beginning of it. And now we integrate into most of the applications that are used in the print and packaging world. And it's easy for us to add another one. So whether it's one of the e-productivity software packages, whether it's Optimus, whether it's Clarity, the list goes on. So the businesses in the printing sector that we both service so well, they would use one of these applications to run their factories. They simply can turn on the carbon module. Well, they need to phone us up and say, I want it, but they simply turn on the carbon module. And what that does is it allows them to have all of this carbon data within their ERP MIS application. It's a very clever model, Jack, very clever. I'll give you an example. There's a very large display business in the UK that secured a very big contract based on having carbon footprint data within their system. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also know there's also therefore another large display company in the UK that lost the contract. But basically you win or lose contracts now based on having this carbon, and that's a real story.
But it is interesting. I mean, I've worked with a number of companies, particularly in the sign industry, where they're providing products, recycled aluminium, whatever. You've got to kind of get all that data out one way or another. It's the cleverness of the system, the development, isn't it, to be able to access that information so easily and accurately. I guess that's the other bit you've got to be very sure about, is how accurate that data is.
It has to be, yeah. It has to be accurate, because it doesn't help climate change if it's not. And no. I've suddenly got my evangelical side of me now that ultimately we've got to reduce emissions to fight climate change, because we all know the problem in the world, right? Yeah, there's things happening all over the world every single day. And if you don't measure properly, you can never prove you are reducing your carbon footprint. So therefore, bad measurement goes the other way. It really is quite dangerous. Yeah, because you may think you're helping climate change. You may think you're reducing your CO2 impact on the world, it's a technical term. But if you're not doing it properly, that's a big issue. That I guess that's what's happening in the industry right now, is everybody realises they've got to measure properly because their name's against it.
It seems like globally it's a difficult area. It goes up and down. Some of the print industry, which is a small part, but an important part, is there a good reason for optimism that things are moving in the right direction?
It's a difficult one. It depends where you are in the world, because we talk about sort of global maturity. So certainly the European market is very advanced. Yeah. And it's only going to there's more legislation coming. And the UK, I know we are part of Europe, but it doesn't matter. We follow the EU. Whatever they do, we do anyway. So we are very advanced, and we're measuring, and it's getting better and better. The whole premise of doing the right thing, European, Northern, the whole of Europe is good. They're advanced. And then if you break that down, some countries like the Nordic region is extremely advanced. But then when you go across the pond to America, they're surprisingly advanced. I spent a lot of time in America this year, and it surprised me how advanced they were. I had a fairly preconceived idea they were a long way behind Europe. But the thing with the US is that They've got big budgets. They're much bigger than us, obviously, and the average size printer is 20 times bigger than an average size print company in the UK. So therefore, they've got the money and the budget. So they're rapidly, overtaking the European market, and the story keeps going. I think it's a hard one. It ebbs and flows. It goes up and down. If you spend time looking at legislation that comes out of various parts of the world, there is lots that's bubbling through. It may not be live yet, but it will be live, because it's going through the various governmental kind of approval processes. So I think most governments accept it has to happen, but it ebbs and flows slightly. But I think this year we've had a good year. I think next year is going to be more challenging. There's much more that businesses have to do. And I bring that back to the point I made a bit earlier, that if you're producing something that is plastic based, any type of product, which is largely the display market, there's a lot of eyeballs on that at the moment, and it's really very, very important to understand the carbon impact of a display board, a banner, a floor graphic. I mean, there's a lot of eyes on that.
And it's good to know that there is a way of responding to that and dealing with it. You're giving them the opportunity to do that, I guess, is where we're going with that. Now, you mentioned the US. I mean, from Carbon Quota as a business's point of view, is that an area that you're looking to expand into over the coming years? Is that your sort of next stage
for
the business?
It is. It is. But we've got to be very careful because it, as I said just now, is a big place, Jack. It's a big old place. You don't realise you're going to get on a plane and go from one side to the other. But yes, it is. But we're doing it very cautiously. Ultimately, we are a business that needs to invest our money very carefully, and we don't have to, and the UK market is surprisingly big, and there's still many, many businesses that could work with us in the UK. So we remain focused on the UK. We are doing lots of work in the Northern Europe at the moment. So there's lots of activity there because we're almost being pulled into those markets. And, I have to pinch myself sometimes. When I say we are pulled into the market, literally customers want to trade with us out of Norway, Sweden or Denmark. So therefore, we've got to adapt our business to how did we trade with those businesses, and it's fine, we can do it. But the same's happening in North America. We're being pulled into North America because our brand's becoming so famous now. And I can't, like I say, I've got to pinch myself. We're becoming so famous for what we do. We're almost in the position where marketing is very important, but actually they can easily find us on Google. We do obviously lots of these kind of lovely sessions like we're doing right now. That really helps, enormous. But we're becoming the name associated with carbon footprint for print and packaging. Therefore, we get pulled into different regions of the world. But we just need to do it cautiously because we've got a lovely business in the UK that we've got to maintain, right? So therefore, I don't want anything to suffer in the UK because Dominic got on a flight and went to New York for a week. I mean, that's not particularly helpful from a business point of view, but we're growing rapidly is your answer, Jack. We're growing very carefully.
Just to finish, we've covered a bit of this during the conversation, but just sort of summarise, really. I mean, the key message to businesses, particularly the UK, Nordic we talked about, in our industry, in the printer packaging industry, they maybe haven't started their journey on sustainability yet, but they're looking, they know they've got to do something. What's kind of your message to them as the sort of first step?
Find a way to measure and use a third party to measure what their carbon impact is. Now, there's lots of detail below that, but ultimately a business should measure and be transparent about the results. So measure what you do and share it on your website, share it with your customers. And if you get into that routine of measuring and reducing, that transparency drives a lot of goodwill with customers, an awful lot of goodwill. And so I think in a very simple thing, just measure. And obviously, Carbon Quota can help them do that. But the measurement bit, just start the journey of measurement.
Thank you very much for your time, Dominic.